Gov and Law, Unit 3, Video 1, Political Parties. First of all, let's start with a definition of a political party here in the United States. It is defined as groups of people who share similar beliefs about how the government should be run and how the issues facing our nation should be solved. There are 5 roles that have been identified for political parties. The first role that we've identified is to nominate candidates. To nominate candidates means to choose people who support their platform. We'll define a platform here in a moment. When they meet to choose a candidate, it's often called a caucus. At the caucus, they'll discuss the party's platform, which is the standard beliefs of the group, such as tax policy or foreign intervention, and choose a candidate to move past the caucus toward the general election to be elected into the office by the general public. What happens if there's more than one candidate for office, which we're seeing for the 2016 presidential election? The field is getting deeper on both the Republican and the Democrat side. If that is the case, oftentimes a primary will be held. A primary election narrows the field of candidates to represent the party. So sometimes the primary takes place with the general public, other times it's just people who are registered to vote for that political party, and that varies based on each state. The second role of political parties is to influence policy. Elected officials from political parties create and pass laws to support their party's platform. For example, in New York City, the New York City Police Department, under the guidance of the mayor, created a statute that banned sodas sold in large quantities, while at the same time they passed a statute decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. So this political cartoonist is poking fun of the fact that while New York is busy policing soda in large quantities, which has certainly led to obesity, they are no longer policing the use of small amounts of marijuana to free up the city's criminal court systems. So that's an influence of policy that political parties hold. In New York, specifically, this was done under the Democratic guidance. There are other public policy influencers in political parties. Aside from them, many groups influence public policy and, therefore, laws. Some of those groups include the media. The media covers specific issues, which, example, immunizations affects our influence on that policy. So should we immunize our child? Should we not immunize our child? Should we get the flu shot, or is the flu shot ineffective for the year? Also, interest groups. Interest groups are groups that fund campaigns because they have a specific interest and they support a specific candidate. They do influence public policy and therefore law. And an example of that is lobbyists, those who lobby or approach candidates, and they fund those candidates to support their specific interest. For example, the oil industry here in the United States does have several interest groups as well as hires several lobbyists to lobby or to persuade candidates and elected officials to support their ideas. Also, think tanks. Think tanks are known as research firms that are typically privately owned, but they research information and provide statistics, data, infographics, etc. to candidates during political office. And they certainly do influence policy. An example of a think tank is the Pew Research Center. It is a very well-respected center that serves as a think tank in providing information for not just candidates and elected officials, but the American public. Another role of government is to unite the government. Political parties have shared similar beliefs at the local, state, and national levels, and they work together to achieve those goals. So here we have several Democrats that represent you as a citizen of Olmsted County and of Byron and southern Minnesota. We have everybody from the President of the United States, who's Democrat, down to the most local representatives in government, including your governor and a state senator, your U.S. House of Representatives members, and one of your U.S. senators here in Minnesota. They work together to achieve the goals of the Democratic Party. The fourth role of political parties is to create balance. The most powerful political party is the one that has the most members elected to office. We'll use Congress as our example here. Being in the majority means the party can focus the government's attention on issues that are important to that party's platform. For example, the Republicans currently control both the Senate and the House, giving them a majority in both houses of Congress. The party in the minority, that being the Democratic Party, works hard to oppose the majority party and keep it in check. Usually, the majority party is able to get many laws passed. Depending on the minority party's strength, the majority may need to compromise with the minority before a law will pass. In this way, the opposing party protects the interests of its own party supporters. A similar balance exists when the president and the majority in Congress are from different parties, as we see today. The United States Congress, again, is controlled by the Republicans, and the White House, the presidency, is controlled by the Democratic Party. So we do see a fairly big split between Democrats and Republicans in the current 114th Congress. This map shows the 114th Congress, the House of Representatives map. So this shows the districts broken up in each state and who represents each of those districts. The red represents Republicans and the blue represents Democrats. We can see that we live down here in a solidly blue district represented by Tim Walz. The vast majority of the country, yes, is dominated by red on the map. However, you can see that some states, such as North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming, have just one U.S. House member, whereas states like California have over 50 House members, and some of the districts are rather small. However, they are population dense. Therefore, they do represent a larger majority than the map would tell us. This map shows how many seats the Republicans won in the Senate for the 114th Congress. So you can study this map and show the breakdown of Republicans and Democrats from each state. Most states are either solidly red or solidly blue, meaning that, for example, California has 2 Democratic senators, as does Oregon, Washington, and Minnesota. And most states have 2 Republican senators, whereas some have a mix. Colorado, for example, has 1 Democrat and 1 Republican. And then we have states like Vermont, where we have 1 Democrat and 1 independent. An independent is a candidate who runs for office not under one of the 2 major political parties here in the United States. The fifth and final way that political parties influence American voters is to inform citizens. In running campaigns, they inform voters of the issues, although sometimes they do it in very biased ways. They run campaigns for candidates. That's what political parties do. During campaigns, political parties run TV ads, distribute pamphlets, post blogs, and help candidates give speeches. All of this media helps people understand what the political issues are and how government works. But please be aware that all of the information on a political party distributes is biased toward its own party platform, whether that's Democrat, Republican, or an independent or third party. Because of this, a political party should not be a citizen's only source of information. When political parties run campaign ads on either the internet or the TV, it is very important to consider these things. Is the campaign ad, valid? That means, is it logical and is it factual? Is it accurate? So is it correct and precise in its information, or do they only give you half the story? What is the ideology? So what kind of party principles or party platform is this ad putting forth? Is it Democrat or Republican? Because often campaign ads are recorded and produced by people who are not in the majority party. Rather, they're interest groups supporting the party. Also, what kind of emotional appeals is the campaign ad discussing? What kind of hot-button issues, such as the troops coming home or abortion, are used in the ad to try to persuade you, the voter? What kind of bias, what kind of favoring of one viewpoint or another is the ad showing? And finally, what kind of prejudice, that's a negative opinion without reasoning or unfair grouping, is being shown in the campaign ad? So as a consumer of campaign ads, you should be aware of what is happening. Here in the United States, we do have a 2-party system. 2-party system means that 2 parties hold all of the power. A third party is one that is not one of the major 2. However, they don't often win elections, but they do influence the outcome. For example, Ross Perot ran in 1992 against George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. He gathered a whopping 18% of the electoral vote, which is significantly more. The only time that's been more for a third-party candidate is when Teddy Roosevelt ran under the Bull Moose Party. So what the third party does is they take away those votes from the Democrat or Republican, so they split the votes between the Democrats and Republicans even more and make it much more difficult for those major party candidates to win. So we do have a strong two-party system here in the United States, but that doesn't mean at some point a third party can't rise and dominate or change the two-party system. Again, our two major American political parties are Democrats, those who are considered on the left or liberal, and Republicans, those considered on the right or conservative. If you see political cartoons with an elephant and a donkey, please know that the donkey represents the Democrats and the elephant represents the Republicans. There's a very long history with each of these that you could certainly look up on Google if you're curious as to why each party got that certain animal. To learn a little bit more about how political parties operate here in the United States and how we define them and describe their platforms, please turn to page 7 of your packet. It should look just like this without the text on the bottom. Now that you're there, let's talk a little bit about the party platforms between Democrats and Republicans. Please keep in mind that these are generalizations between Democrats and Republicans. Not every Democrat and every Republican fits into these very neat categories, but I do want to kind of give you an idea of where they might fit. So let's first of all start by looking at Democrats and Republicans and the difference between the Democrats and Republicans. So again, I said that Democrats are on the left, and so if we kind of make a line down the center, this is the center or moderate line, and then Republicans are over here on the right. So Democrats typically fall in more toward the center of this area, so they would fall more toward the middle of the liberal spectrum. However, there are some Democrats that are way out here on the left end of the spectrum, and there are Republicans who are way out here on the right. However, let's start with more toward the center policies for both groups. So Democrats that favor some government control will support passing laws to protect consumers, such as those that protect you from unsafe food products at the grocery store. Democrats also support creating government programs, such as financial aid for students, to support education. On the right side of the spectrum, but pretty close to the center, Republicans will encourage the public sector and the private sector to work together to solve problems. So this is the government working with perhaps a tech corporation to solve a major technology problem at the state or local level. Furthermore, Republicans will want to offer tax breaks to individuals and businesses to promote private investment rather than public investment. So these are considered very moderate policies. These very moderate policies are promoted by most Democrats and most Republicans. However, we do have some who fall on the more conservative or more liberal ends of the spectrum. So let's start with the Democrats. Democrats further heavy regulation of businesses to promote the common good. So lots of rules, regulations, perhaps taxes for businesses to make sure that they're doing what's best for society. Very liberal Democrats also like to take strong action to solve society's problems, whether that's strong social intervention, strong educational intervention, etc. Whereas on the opposite side of the spectrum, conservatives, who are very conservative on the far end, will work to avoid involvement in society's problems. They believe that the least government control is the best government control. Also, they will favor deregulation. So they will favor deregulating or demonitoring certain industries to promote private investment and promote more profit. So let's talk about some politicians and where they fall on each end of the spectrum. So if we think about our current president, Barack Obama, we could put him anywhere on the spectrum. However, most analysts would agree that he's a pretty moderate or in the middle Democrat. So we would put Obama right here, more toward the center. Obama's former opponent, Mitt Romney, would fall in the same side, on the same area, but just on the opposite side of the spectrum. Now we do have a very deep candidacy for the political office of the president for the 2016 election. We'll discuss those more in class, but most analysts would agree that Hillary Clinton would be somewhere right around where Barack Obama is as far as on the liberal scale, and the Republican